Hi, today we are in San Francisco at Partech International with Nicolas. Nicolas, who are you and what do you do?
I'm a venture capitalist. We are a fund that invests in startups, early stage startups in technology across the Atlantic. So Paris, Berlin, San Francisco.
Can you name some of them? Maybe some of our readers know them.
Oh, well, we can go back in history and go back to business objects a long time ago. We can go more recently if we want to touch on Berlin companies, for example, Brands for Friends was an investment of ours. More recently, La Fourchette in France and Spain, you may have heard of. That was acquired by TripAdvisor. Probably another 150.
Wow.
So,
what is your background? And why did you become a VC?
an increasing number of people who come into this business in the Valley and increasingly in Europe too. I came from an entrepreneurial and operating background.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on the entrepreneur side for 15 plus years, close to 20 years. I started a bunch of companies. Most of them failed. A few of them were successful. Partech was an investor in a couple of the companies that I co-founded. And as I exited those companies, I was offered the opportunity to come around the table and with a team that I, came to trust over the years, and I did that, and it's been a lot of fun.
Why didn't you start just another company after you've started several others, but becoming a partner here at Partech?
That's a question I asked myself for a long time. I probably went for a period of easily 2 to 3 years, going back and forth on that. And, eventually it's a lifestyle decision. It's a very personal decision at some point. In my case, I had young kids. I had some success with my startups before. I wanted to continue to be doing really exciting things and building companies. But I also wanted to kind of find a balance with my personal life and spend more time with my children. So, in the venture business, I like to say that we work a lot, sometimes at least as much as the entrepreneurs, not quite. But we have a lot of flexibility in how we manage our time. We don't manage people per se. We get involved with companies, with entrepreneurs, with management teams, but we don't, have the operating imperative that you have when you run a company, which is much more demanding in terms of your of the schedule and mostly less flexible. So that was the drive for me.
Yeah.
In addition, on the positive side, also the opportunity to work on lots of exciting things versus just a few.
Right.
And that's pretty exciting.
And you can diversify your portfolio, so to speak, just because not just
Yeah,
working only on one idea, but
for me, there wasn't much of a criteria. I mean, clearly there's a portfolio aspect to what we do, and you diversify your risk. But you also lose in terms of, adrenaline.
Yeah.
So you're kind of an advisor, and you have to play a buffering role with the entrepreneurs, and so by definition you don't experience the highs and you don't experience the lows with the same intensity.
Right.
So that's that may be a plus or a minus depending on your personality or where you are in your life. But.
Right. And what are the major tasks that you are doing, and how are they distributed over a week, a month, or a year?
At a high level, I would say people like me probably spend half of our time working with the companies that we're involved with, invested in, and the other half looking at stuff, meeting with new companies, meeting entrepreneurs, meeting with people in our network, learning about our environment, being on the lookout.
Okay.
At a high level. Now, in terms of what we do with the portfolio companies, which was the other part of your question, it really is kind of an on-demand role. I like to be kind of on-demand or on call with the entrepreneurs that we work with. So in terms of what that means, that can vary in time and also varies very much with the needs of the company and also the background of the entrepreneurs. Their experience is really what I mean there. Some of the entrepreneurs we invest in are extremely experienced, more so than I am. So what I bring to the table is not so much operating know-how, because they know better. Yeah. It's a different perspective. It may be a kind of a step back strategic view on what they do, or it may be related to the transatlantic connections that we can bring. So that it could more of a strategic level.
So we are more trying to challenge those perspectives of the entrepreneur, and on the other hand, trying to help him get in touch with other people that might help him grow his business.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of those two things, right? I think when the reason entrepreneurs want a venture capitalist, or should want a venture capitalist on their board, is to bring a perspective that they don't have, right? It's to challenge them by definition. Not necessarily to argue, but challenge constructively. And so the way you should build a board as an entrepreneur is by bringing together people who bring different expertise, different backgrounds, but whatever that is, different than yours. So that's how it works well. Now there is specific value add that we at Partech can bring because of our global presence. Yeah. Global meaning today mostly Europe and the US, and obviously we try to bring that value to the table as well whenever that's relevant. In some cases, that was the other part of my answer. We also deal with a lot of very young entrepreneurs who haven't done a lot of things before. So in that case, the contribution could be a little different. It could be, much more operational. It could be, advising on budgeting, signing an office lease or a bank lease. It could be very practical things as well, and we're happy to bring that to the table whenever we can.
Okay, great. If the entrepreneur or the business model is performing well and the business is growing, entrepreneur is happy, VC is happy, how do you manage when the company you have invested in is going almost bust or like the hill down? What do you do?
It's no different, all right? I like to say that one of the ways I measure whether I am a good board member is if the entrepreneur feels comfortable and free to call me whenever something bad happens, and call me in real time, because ultimately we want to be and we should be on the same side of the table once we're invested. We're all fighting for maximizing the value of of shareholder value. Yeah. And so when something unexpected and bad happens, whether loss of a major customer or partner or people related issues, we should be working on resolving them together. So I think the key for me is, and should be, I think, for entrepreneurs, I certainly was for me when I was on that side of the table, is you want to be very comfortable discussing issues of the business, whether they're positive or negative, and working through them. Because ultimately when, if the conclusion at some point in the company is it's not working, or it's not working as expected, or not to the scale that we all want it, the conclusions that we come to should be the same whether you're the entrepreneur or the investor. If it makes sense to sell the company versus growing it independently, that should be a rational decision based on what we all observe from the business. Or if it makes sense to shut down the company, now we don't like when it happens, but it happens, right? So it shouldn't be a conflict. It's like when you're raising children, you want them, to come to you as a parent when something bad's happening or they got in trouble, so you can help resolve it and address it. It's no different.
Okay. Let's talk about Partech International. Can you give us a brief overview of what Partech International looks like in terms of maybe structuring, asset under management, or and what type of industries or company sizes you are investing in?
Sure. So first, from a branding point of view, we rebranded Partech Ventures. So I just want to clarify that for a second. Same thing, but we both names are out there, but the formal name is Partech Ventures. So we invest in early stage companies at different stages of the early stage, meaning seed and after seed. But the main criteria being we need to see high growth potential. We do this in an international context, and the structure we have is very unique. I think it's unique in the industry in the sense that we are between our presence in Berlin, Paris, and San Francisco today, we are a single team, single fund structure. We make decisions together, we look at things together. There is no distinction whether you talk to my partner in Paris or me. We will eventually work together on the deals. And if a company, and we think that's huge value add and a differentiator, not just because we work very well together, which we do, but we look at, when we assess an opportunity, we assess it from this global perspective. We look at the competition from a global perspective. We look at the upside from a global perspective. When we work with a company and get involved, it's very fluid. If at some point the company needs to move from one side of the Atlantic to the other, and in what format it does that, because there isn't a formula that works for everybody. So that's a big differentiator for us. In terms of sectors, it's information technology is the driver. We do things at in multiple ends of the spectrum of that, meaning we will invest in innovative consumer services, e-commerce or mobile or whatever that may be, as well as core innovation in infrastructure, whether it's around data, the data center, virtualization cloud, and anything in between. Now, I don't want to make it sound like we'll invest in just about anything. The key criteria for us are there has to be technology as either the core enabler or the core reason for the investment. And also, the number one criteria is the team and the entrepreneurs and the team they build around them. So we always start from that. Yes, there has to be a technology enabler. Yes, there has to be a big market. Yes, the business model has to make sense. But all of these things that I just named vary over time.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Technology may be superior at one point, but then you have competitors. You always have competitors coming. The market changes. The business model may evolve. But the one thing that doesn't or shouldn't or hopefully doesn't change, or the one thing that the constant that we like to base our investment thesis around is the team that we invest in. And so that's why if you look at our portfolio, you will see, or you look at my personal portfolio, for example, to speak from a personal basis, you will see things in core infrastructure, but also in more consumer or business to business kinds of services. And the reason for that is in each case there's a team that I subscribe to, right, that I want to support, because that's the real reason.
What advice would you give an entrepreneur who has just started, like maybe 6 months, 12 months into the game, on what type of a function he should very much focus on his business?
Well, I give him almost the same advice I give ourselves as investors, is the same care we exercise in picking the people we invest in. They should exercise in picking the people they bring together. And that is true in terms of the people they bring together on the investor side, but it's also true in terms of the people they bring together as their core team to start the business. So their co-founder, of course, but the core initial team members are crucial. So one thing I often see as not being paid enough attention to by entrepreneurs is dedicating enough time and resources in the early part of their business life in assembling that team.
Yeah.
People tend to get very enthusiastic about their product, their service, their website, their technology, whatever that is, and just focus on executing and wanting to promote that, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course they should. But it's also really important in the beginning to ensure the viability of your business, the fundability of your business, and the competitive advantage of your business to assemble the team. So as a young CEO and founder, you should probably spend half of your time on the people side and half of the time on the actual business. You know, I'm maybe exaggerating in some cases, but not by much. And I think that's often underplayed. And that would be the main advice I give.
And with people, you mean recruiting, retaining, motivating, or is it only recruiting?
You know, I almost don't want to use the word recruiting, because recruiting is an activity you tend to do a little later. What you're looking for in the very early stage, and I'm addressing your question from a really early stage point of view, it's really assembling a team, and the word teammate is important.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to have employees. Sure. You want to have people who subscribe to your vision, who will work to pursue the vision in a disproportionate way to how they're compensated near term, who will work with you in overcoming obstacles, and those are not those are not employees. Those are co-founders almost, even if they come a little later. That's what I mean by that, right? Recruiting is not easy, but it's more technical. When the company is more mature, yes, you're doing a lot of recruiting, and you also want to recruit the right kind of people. But the founder doesn't have to be quite as involved, except at the executive level.
Mm-hmm. Imagine you have a son, and your son comes to you and says, Daddy, I would like to start a company, and he's 15, 16 years old. What would you recommend to him?
Go for it. I would give them the same advice I was given when I was young. I think there is absolutely zero downside or risk in going for what you believe in when you're young. Mm-hmm. I think there is a energy that you have, almost unreasonableness you have that can bear a lot of fruit. Mm-hmm. So I would absolutely say go for it and surround yourself with the right people.
What happens if your son says, yeah, but Daddy, what happens if it doesn't work out?
Great, you'll hopefully learn from it, right? We like to invest, by the way, in entrepreneurs who failed before. I know from my own experience, I learned a lot more from the experiences that failed than from the ones that succeeded. Because typically when things succeed, it's because they went well, right? It's obvious, but that doesn't mean you didn't have to overcome obstacles, but it means that you solved the problems as they went, as they happen. When you fail, typically you couldn't find the answer. Mm-hmm. And that means you encountered really, really strong obstacles that were showstoppers. Typically those bring a lot of lessons.
Nicolas, you saw so many entrepreneurs and you worked together with them as well. What have been the major learnings you learned from other entrepreneurs? Where you said, wow, this was some interesting lesson for me. I didn't know this before, or this is a new perspective that this entrepreneur showed to me. And can you make it a little bit vivid also? Yeah,
it's an interesting question. I think what I've learned, which I knew but I keep learning over and over, is that first of all, you have to remember that we're not the entrepreneurs, they are.
Yeah.
So they know their business typically way better than you do. Mm-hmm. They've thought about it, living it day to day. and they carry their vision. So one thing I've learned over and over is if you pick the right people, and typically you pick them because you trust them, you really have to trust them because ultimately they know better. Right. It doesn't mean you don't have value to bring, or you can't influence things, or you can't advise, but you ultimately need to, if you pick the right people, and that is really the key, right? Once you make that call, you really have to go with them. And the enthusiasm, and that's another lesson, the enthusiasm, the persistence, the determination in pursuing the vision usually pays off. Mm-hmm. Almost doesn't matter what sector or what the activity is. The passion wins because everybody, all your competitors will encounter difficulties and obstacles. So it's whoever believes in it the most, whoever has the most faith, passion, energy, relentlessness is going to win.
Okay. And how and when should an entrepreneur contact you or some other venture capitalist for raising money? If the objective of the entrepreneur is raising money, when and how should you contact you?
There is no rule for that. I think the key is setting the context correctly. What I mean is, I see entrepreneurs, and I'm very happy to see entrepreneurs all the time who aren't really ready. Mm. They just want informal advice. Yeah. So if somehow I get in touch with them or they get in touch with me through the network, and it's okay to call a VC and say, I'm working in this space, I understand you may have an interest in that, or so and so told me you might have some interesting input. That's fine, and I know that's true for my partners too. We're open to seeing entrepreneurs in that context and just providing formal feedback. We're just as happy to see them when they have a very well-framed
ready to invest,
pitch, and we're very happy to do that as well. So I think to us, and it makes sense for entrepreneurs, by the way, especially new entrepreneurs or young people, to use every opportunity they have and they can to get to know investors, to gather advice. Because after an informal discussion, they will better know, for example, what interests me or what doesn't interest me, mm-hmm. or at what stage I would get involved with a company in a particular space versus a different space, right? Because, for example, it's a little easier to invest really, really, really early in a company that has a very unique technology versus, say, a consumer company that's all based on marketing, where we may want to see a little more traction before we get involved. And that varies with investors, so no rule. No rule, just we want to see enthusiasm, and as long as the expectations are set correctly. Right?
Great. Thank you very much for your time, Nicolas. And if you want to pitch next time to some of the investors, try to think about whether the market is big enough, whether you have some great technology that solves a big enough problem, and whether you're really passionate about your idea. Thank you very much.
Great. Pleasure.
Thank you very much, Nicolas.
Take care.